All right, welcome. It's a pleasure to welcome my favorite guest over these last few months and years is going to be, and extending into the future, I would hope, and that being Howard Bloom. And Howard Bloom has been recognized by a great number of people. What does it say off the cover of the book? The greatest since Darwin?
Oh, that's a quote from Channel 4 TV in Britain, and it was repeated by the same author in a book and a DVD. It says Howard Bloom was the Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, Sir Isaac Newton, and Sigmund Freud of the 21st century.
Just to name a few, to name a few of the lesser lights.
Right.
Yeah. A book, and the book here, we got it displayed on the page you can actually see now. It's called The God Problem, how a godless cosmos creates a major tour de force. One of the big, rather thick book that I've read the whole thing of. And above all else, not only is it intellectually so stimulating in so many different areas, but it's also imbued and infused with a tremendous sense of humor, very well honed,
Thank you.
for which I thank you and so forth. And it's really good to welcome you to the program and to welcome the audience to with the beginning of the year 2014. This will be the first program here. So good to see you, Howard.
Harold, it's a pleasure.
You're looking great and
Thanks.
everything. And you had said to me, we were chatting before we started the program, that among other things, and we could go briefly over your background because you've written a book right from the beginning of physics, understanding of physics, the birth of the universe, string theory, biology, human mind, and that sort of thing. But you were talking, you introduced here in our conversation how, among other things, you introduced us to the 60s.
Yes.
Maybe we could talk about that. By a little bit of your background, real quick and so forth, and then let's talk about the 60s and the moment that might be well for us all to try and recapture at that time. But just a little bit of your background and then that.
Well,
let's get into that way.
Background, that's tricky. I just finished 2 weeks ago doing a speech via video to 3 government ministers in Malaysia. I work with the 11th President of India, Dr. APJ Kalam, who's a rocket scientist who created India's rocket program that's now got a probe on its way to Mars.
You work with him in what way?
He wants to harvest solar energy in space and send it back down to Earth.
Wow, okay.
Which is a solution to all the energy problems we always talk about. It's carbon-free, it produces no pollution whatsoever, and the energy source is infinite. Literally, well, almost literally infinite.
Yeah.
And
is he trying to develop entrepreneurially? Is there technology
he's
behind
trying
it?
to get the G8 and the G20 to pay attention to this.
Okay, I'm sorry, it was a sidebar. Yeah, okay.
And I work with Buzz Aldrin, who kidnapped me into starting a space group. My background, at the age of 10, I got into microbiology and theoretical physics. And then I went off on a wild path. I discovered at 13 that my real interest was mass human passions, mass human behavior, the forces of history, the dark underbelly of human society, where our emotions, our desire to be part of something infinitely bigger than ourselves, lift us and exhilarate us, but at the same time can be used for good or for evil.
You think it's part of the evolutionary process itself, of
it
which
is
we
absolutely
are the apex of, perhaps seen in a certain way?
We are the apex. There's no question about that. If you bring on anybody to contest that, I will contest them.
But it is all one system, and ecologically we have to be appreciative of the larger ecology and the larger context.
It's an even larger system than ecology. We are the cosmos trying to find her next possibilities. We are the cosmos on a search.
That begins to sound like something, a species on the search of punctuated equilibrium to a new order and relationship in the cosmos.
Right.
We can see that.
We are the probes of the cosmos toward that next level of order, which we have to invent. That's our job.
That was a favorite term of Marshall McLuhan, probe. He used to do probes, and he would do it to the consternation of many people around him, deliberately putting them on, in a certain sense.
Well, we are probes, and we're more than probes. We're part of the creative process. Nature is constantly radically reinventing herself, upheaving herself through radical change. And every radical change is a brilliant and absolutely unforeseeable act of creativity. And our job is not only to foresee it, but to be it, to make the change.
All right, but there are changes. There's quantitative change within an order, and then there are qualitative changes which could be translated out into the emergence of a new species, a new order of things on a qualitative scale.
New emergent orders, new emergent orders are our job. And to get to emergent orders, you have to proliferate within the existing order to the best of your ability. You have to make a million tiny little changes to get get to the platform point that allows you to jump to the next point. And
that's an interesting thing, if you don't mind. That's an interesting thing. I don't know, 99.9% of all the species that have ever existed have gone extinct.
Right.
That is, a lot of that has gone gross in terms of, that. And that the means by which a particular movement or attitude, activity in the universe or something is going to make it, as it were, in a certain sense. Can we compare that or include that, the human experience within that kind of a context, that we may be coming to a way of being, speciation in universe from the 200,000 year or whatever extension of what we see as the human experience in evolutionary terms?
Yes, because
that's a big change. That's a big qualitative change.
Individual species are the cosmos probing for her next level up. And there have been probably 100 million species minimum on this planet so far. 100 million probes, 100 million attempts to feel out the next great possibility.
That's a useful number. I mean, you've done.
No, I'd have to do the research on it. There are 10 million species alive today, and as you said, 99% of the species are gone.
Yeah.
And if you multiply 10 million times 100, you get a billion. So there may have been as many as 1 billion species, but we'd have to. That's the kind of thing I would research extensively before ever putting it into a book.
You wouldn't put it in. You haven't put it. Okay, good.
But the basic principle.
I'll tell you, you've done a lot of research for the God problem.
I do research like hell for all of my books.
I know. Good.
I want them to be the best research books that you've ever read, which is not easy because there have been some brilliant people who've done brilliantly researched books.
And you do it with. You have such a good, well-honed sense of humor. I mean, there's a little line that's just. It's very, very. Congratulations. The book is unable to put it down. It's so well written.
Well, you know,
and intellectual integrity to it.
Well, it's there to challenge everything you think you know.
Okay.
It's there to give you entirely new ways of thinking about things. It's there to present you again with the shoulders of giants on which you can stand, but new shoulders of giants, new levels up. Because this book, How Accidentally Started the 60s.
Yeah, can we bring that in? Can we focus on it? That's you. That's a picture of you at another age level and everything. That's pretty good. Yeah, they can come in on it. That's really good. Who did that photograph? That's funny.
Jason Schneider.
Yeah.
We were both students at NYU when we took this in the corridors of NYU.
When would this have been?
I would have been about 24 years old, and I had already helped start the 60s 3 or 4 years earlier.
Yeah, right.
And this book is available from Amazon as an ebook.
This one is How I Accidentally Started the 60s. Right. Accidentally started. Right. You started the 60s.
Well, yes, but before we get into that, I want to show you where this relates to the questions that you were talking about.
Please.
And the spirit of the 60s was about adventure. The spirit of the 60s was going out to extremes. It was going into extreme experiences of a kind no person in your position had ever had before. And there are 2 ways to have an adventure. An adventure is a learning experience, and you can learn either from the dark side of an adventure, never to go there again, or you can learn from the bright side of the adventure, where to go in the future. You can use an adventure to cage yourself, or you can use an adventure to expand yourself.
That could be the thing we were talking about. What are the terms by which a species gets to a certain point that makes it possible to go through the eye of the needle and become something new? There's a process.
Well, there's a process, but the process for us is different than. But let me just finish on the 60s because it relates to what you're talking about. The spirit of the 60s was to go out on the extremes of adventure and come back with the good points, come back with the ways in which these adventures open doors to entirely unforeseen previous possibilities.
Probes, like you said.
Probes, exactly. And the spirit of today is the opposite. We're suffering from an overdose. Look, the eco-thinking that's been going on since 1970 and the first Earth Day. It's 43 years.
And John McConnell started that.
Well, I first encountered it in the 1950s.
Okay,
And that kind of eco-thinking was extremely good for our society. It showed us certain boundaries. There were 3 cities that were drowning in smog. When major smog attacks came in one of those cities, London, as many as 243 people would die in a smog attack. They were London, New York, and LA. L.A. was famous for its smog.
Would
And-
Rachel Carlson been in that? Or
Yes,
that kind of
Rachel
Silent
Carlson.
Spring would have been a
Silent
thing in
Spring was a vital
Silent-
kickoff point.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been pre-60s.
Right.
Yeah, but okay, yeah.
So, at any rate,
Yeah.
this movement cleaned up our air. They don't have this problem in London anymore.
Right.
We don't have this problem in New York anymore, and they don't. Smog is no longer LA's badge of identity.
Right. It is in Peking, I think.
And Peking,
It
it's
is
not just
pretty
Peking. A
yeah.
third of China
Yeah.
for the last month
Yeah.
has been experiencing chemical attack
Yeah.
from its own effluents.
Right, right, right.
That's been poisonous.
Oh.
But the people in China are very, very eco-aware thanks to our eco movement, which gave them a vocabulary with
Right.
which to address this.
Satanic Mills, Blake called
Right,
them.
exactly.
Yeah, right.
And they will address this.
Yeah.
They're on the path to addressing this. The point is that eco-thinking, in balance with all the other kinds of thought in our society,
Yeah.
was a positive.
Okay.
But now it's become a cancer.
You think so? Okay, good.
Any good thing,
Spell it out, yeah.
any good thing in overdose is a poison.
That's interesting concept. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
And eco-thinking is now overdosing us. It has
Okay.
made us think, and this goes back to the spirit of the 60s.
Okay.
It's the opposite of the spirit of the 60s. It's harvesting the dark side of every adventure. It's harnessing a sense of boundaries. It made an accurate...
Limits
Limits
to growth.
to growth
Remember
is the
limits to
standard
growth.
phrase.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a very common phrase
yeah,
today.
Yeah.
And how we accidentally started the 60s is a comic, it's not a comic book, but it's a humorous book, but it's
Yeah.
a book about adventures that have everything to do with the meaning of your life.
Uh-huh.
Your life, not just my life. But what's happened with the eco-nihilism is what I call it.
Okay.
When eco-thinking takes over too much, remember, there was a book in 1971 called The Population Bomb.
Ehrlich.
By Paul Ehrlich at
yeah.
Stanford
And there
University.
had been, what's his name? The great population guy. Who was the guy in Europe?
Malthus?
Malthus, yeah, Malthus.
Of course, this was Malthus. It was him thinking.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this book told us that by 1980, which was 9 years away, 9 years into the future in 1971,
Yeah,
by
okay.
1980, the planet would be so overcrowded that we would have hundreds of millions of people starving to death at a time. We
Yeah.
couldn't provide the food for them. And people would be literally standing on each other's shoulders
Well, that
because
was-
there would be no room
That
for
was
them.
Malthus. And he said it would, as a means of food, taken care of, go
In an arithmetic order, and
population goes
in a
geometric
order.
Yeah, right.
Well, Malthus has been proven wrong over
Well,
and
it
over
has.
again.
They used
too.
to have families 13, and because 12 of them would die before
Right,
there were 5.
exactly.
And so forth.
And
Yeah.
things have changed dramatically
Right.
since then.
And don't
But
forget,
Ehrlich's-
James Joyce called history, he said history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. I just throw
well,
that in.
that's the
For
negative
hell of it.
side of adventure. I'm for the positive side of adventure, and that's what this book is about.
Okay.
I'm for the side of adventure that opens new
This is an
avenues to the
e-book now
sky.
you're talking?
It's an e-book,
Yeah.
right?
And is this just out now? What are we talking about? Is
This
something new?
This book in 1990. It was 2 years. In 1988, I came down with a ghastly illness, a hideous
Yeah,
illness.
you had that
And
chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yes, and I was locked in bed basically for
Yeah.
15 years.
Amazing,
And for the first 5 years, I was too weak to talk.
First 5 of the 15.
Yeah, it was from roughly 1990 until 1995.
Didn't you have 3 where you were bedridden?
I had 15 where I was bedridden.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I was a prisoner of my bedroom.
Oh.
And I realized that to survive, I was going to have to find some sort of a social group. I'd been, the leading publicist in the rock and roll business, which
Yeah,
for
I
me
know.
was a scientific expedition into the forces of history.
Right,
Because
okay.
I didn't know anything about rock and roll
You'd
until I
stumbled
got
into
involved.
that, hadn't
yeah,
you? Or
I'd
you-
stumbled into it. It was exactly the adventure I needed to find the dark underbelly
Yeah.
of mass human passions, or the myth-making machinery
Yeah,
of
yeah.
modern society, the
You
forces
could
of
have read
history.
Vance Packard and the Hidden Persuader.
Well, I
Yeah,
did.
Yeah, yes, I would have thought. Yeah.
Yes, when I
Being
was
a
a
bright
kid.
young fellow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
So-
having survived your puberty in Buffalo.
Oh God, puberty in Buffalo. Yes.
To quote Auntie Mame. you know.
Yes, right.
How bleak was my puberty in Buffalo?
Right.
That's where you grew up.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
But where were we here?
We were talking about the 60s.
yeah.
And we were talking about.
But
yeah.
then the spirit of adventure and eco-nihilism and all
Yeah.
of that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
This was about going out. You want to know about how I accidentally started at 60. So I was in bed.
Yeah.
I needed desperately to have some sort of social contact, even
You
though I
reached out
couldn't
on the
talk.
computer, didn't you?
I reached out
Yeah.
on the computer, but we didn't have an internet yet.
Yeah.
So I would type these things up on my word processor. I had an assistant at the house, or a caregiver, or whatever you call a person who's taking care of you. And I tried to find people I could communicate with by snail mail who would actually return my snail mails.
Right.
And to do it, I knew I couldn't tell them the miserable story of what I was actually going through, so I decided to tell them the story of how I accidentally started the 60s.
Right.
And I was steeped in P.G. Wodehouse and Dave Barry. I needed their humor to survive.
Their humor?
Their humor.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Their humor lifted me out
It's
of
a
this
great curative,
misery.
Yeah.
And so I wrote one adventure roughly a week. And I sent it out to the very, very tiny number of people, perhaps 3.
You made adventures out of your own life?
Well, the adventures were there. I had been telling them ever since I'd experienced
You've
them.
been telling them and experiencing them.
Yeah.
You weren't fictionalized.
No, this was not fiction. This was reality.
This was just Bloom.
Yeah, this was
Bloom
real.
on the
I mean,
Bloom.
this was distilling the style of these 2 great humorists, and they
Yeah.
are great humorists,
Right,
P.G.
right,
Wodehouse and
right.
Dave Barry,
Yeah.
into my own system, and your own system creates a style of its own.
Right,
It
yeah.
can't really just imitate people at
Right,
all. It
right.
absorbs them and then creates something beyond,
Right.
hopefully beyond them.
And your discovering of that, had that been characteristic of your whole life? You had this very highly toned and curative sense of humor? Because I think of you as having one of the most finely tuned sense of humor I've ever run into, and it really informs the whole thing.
That's a wonderful thing to say.
No,
but-
it's true.
So I'll get back to that in a second. I'll
Okay.
finish telling you this story.
Okay, please.
So I sent this out. Only 3 people were responding to but that was enough. That was a social group, Harold. That was better than 0.
3, snail
Yes.
mail.
Snail mail.
And who were the 3?
And my former high school history teacher, who I had adored and who I had reconnected with after 25 or 30 years.
Good.
A guy who'd been a country music editor for Cashbox, the music trade magazine, and who now was a professor of music and its history down in Nashville, Tennessee. And I can't remember who the third one was. Oh, the third one was a former employee of mine who wrote scripts for horror films in her spare time, and who had a wonderful sense of humor.
And these were very, very they were very important to
They
your
were important because
status of consciousness.
they were the only people who would respond to me. They
Wow.
were the only people with whom I could
like
converse.
throwing a bottle into the ocean.
Yeah,
and
even
wanting
though I had to
go
converse
Guam.
by typing.
Yeah,
So
right.
I tried to entertain the ass off of these people with these stories. And in telling them out loud over the previous decades, I had succeeded in entertaining the ass off of people with messages, with adventures that had messages that were powerfully important for understanding your own life.
And had a humorous tone?
Yes, they were humorous as hell.
All the time?
They were as
So you
humorous
were
as I
young,
could make them.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
You could have done stick.
Look, I'm a comic figure.
Right,
I
right.
mean, do I look like a romantic hero? Do I look like George Clooney? Not in the least. I look like a combination between a Muppet and Woody Allen.
Well, look at this. Look at this picture.
Yes,
right?
exactly. and as seen through the eyes of somebody who's been taking LSD.
Yeah,
so,
right.
you know, I have no choice but humor. Plus, so I wrote all of these episodes.
Right, yeah.
And I wrote them from 1990 to about 1994, and then I put them together in a book because it makes the story of one hellacious adventure.
Okay,
One absolutely
right.
hellacious adventure. And I want you to see your life through the lenses these things provide, these adventures provide.
Right.
Why? Because these are lessons on the positive side.
Okay.
These are not the lessons of the negative side. These are not the lessons that build new bars for a prison for you. These are the ones that let you go free from the prison, see the sun, and then learn how to soar.
And a source of liberation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really, yeah, right.
So
Okay,
there's this quote on the cover. Can you read it from there?
Wow, wee, wild, wonderful Timothy Leary.
And there's this long version. Every page, every paragraph, every sentence sparkles with captivating metaphors, delightful verbal concoctions, alchemical insights, philosophic whimsy, absurd illogical, scientific comedy routines, relentless non-stop waves of hilarity, wow, woo, wild, wonderful, Timothy Leary.
That was Timothy Leary. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 1995 and I finished this thing. And I want to see if I can get endorsements from people who know the 60s.
He had a good sense of humor. He had a good sense of humor.
Apparently, I didn't know that.
Right,
I had never met him.
Yeah.
So I contacted my friend Eric Gardner, who had been a roadie for the Jefferson Airplane, thinking that maybe the Jefferson Airplane could read this and I could get a quote from Grace Slick or Marty Balin.
Right.
And he said, oh, no, I'm working with somebody that I think is a much better idea, Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
So he got the book to Tim, and that's what his friends always call him. I can't be so familiar with him because we never met. But he got the book to Timothy Leary, right? And Timothy Leary read it, and this quote came back. Now, I doubted.
It came back through snail mail, or
what? It came back through snail mail in those days, yeah.
Was he upstate New York then?
No, he was in California, apparently.
Okay, yeah.
And it came back from his manager. It came back from Eric Gardner.
Yeah.
And at first I was just stunned. It was such an amazing quote.
Absolutely.
And then I began to doubt that it actually came from Timothy Leary. I began to suspect that Eric had written the quote just to be nice to me, and that he'd gotten Timothy's permission to use Timothy's name or something like that.
Yeah.
3 years
Having
later,
been in the business.
Right. Well, 3 years later, in 1998, I got a visit from Douglas Rushkoff, the author you had on the show.
Great guy, yeah.
And a guy named something like Doug Cameron, who was an artist from San Francisco. And the two of them, they explained, had been with Timothy Leary at his bedside for the last 4 months of Timothy Leary's life. They had watched Timothy die. And it had been a very, very emotional experience for them. And so I asked them, I had a printer set up next to the bed, and I printed out this quote, 2 copies of it, and I handed it to them. And I asked them, could this have possibly really come from Timothy Leary?
Yeah, because they had known him well.
Yeah, but I knew the answer. It didn't come from Tim.
Couldn't have.
No, it couldn't have. It was too wonderful. And they read it, and they went into this very peculiar, dark silence. And I knew exactly what it was. They didn't want to hurt my feelings, and they were trying to figure out how to tell me it didn't come from him.
Because you were under the weather as it was.
Oh yes.
Yeah, right. So they had to be solicitous of your state of mind.
Yes, and they had to be polite. And then they opened their mouths, and it turned out that wasn't it at all. This had brought Timothy back to them as if they were still sitting by his bedside, watching him breathe his last 15 minutes of breaths, watching him struggle for life. And it had stunned them into silence.
I think they said, that's Tim.
That's exactly what they said. And then, 3 or 4 months ago, when somebody asked me, how in the world did you get a quote from Timothy Leary? He died in 1996. I tried to figure out the chronology, and I wrote a press release, and I sent it to Doug Rushkoff to make sure I'd gotten it right. And then suddenly something occurred to me. I was writing the most extraordinary humor I possibly could, all about real things that really happened and the lessons that you could derive from them. It infuses your whole
book, you know.
Well, thank you.
It really does, yeah.
So I was trying to write the highest humor I possibly could. I wanted to dance your sense of humor to the point of laughing its ass off.
Yeah.
And
but sophisticated, really sophisticated use of the language.
Well, apparently,
on the humorous side.
Apparently, I can't help that. I grew up reading
that's
2
what
books.
You get.
I grew up reading 2 books a day, so I'm a walking book. I'm a walking library. So this reached Timothy 4 months before he died of prostate cancer. Timothy was laying in a bed just like me, needing to be lifted totally out of what he was undergoing. And now I suddenly understood 4 months ago why Timothy Leary was so struck to the bone by this book. Because he needed that kind of humor beyond humor. The way I needed humor beyond humor.
You say you had a camaraderie.
Exactly. So we never met. And you're just making me realize now I did something important by accident for his life. And of course he did something quite deliberately remarkable for mine with this amazing, just astonishing quote.
Yeah, that's right. So that's one chapter in the ever running narrative, the Bloom narrative.
But the big trick,
Bloomsday.
The big trick is, we've been through this before, so bear with me.
Yeah, by all means.
When I was 10 years old and a lost kid because nobody wanted me in Buffalo, New York, my mother fled from me. I was alone in Buffalo, New York.
How bleak was my puberty in
it
Buffalo?
was quite bleak.
Yeah.
And one day I'm sitting in this great big living room my father has been able to afford to move us to only 2 years earlier after living in a house the size of a split pea.
Yeah.
And this book appears in my lap. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it's called. And it said the first 2 rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. Mm-hmm. And look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Look for things that you and everybody around you take for granted, you never see. Look for those invisible things. Pry them out of invisibility.
And that puts you towards science in a way that you hadn't been?
It made science my religion.
Okay.
At the age of 10.
Okay.
That's when I
And
got involved in.
Who was the author of that book?
I don't know.
Oh, really?
No, I don't have a clue. But
I'll be
whoever it
damned.
was saved my life.
It was a book.
Yes.
It would have had a title. It would have had an author.
Yes, but
you can't find it?
No, I can't find
Have
it.
you got all your books in your library all carefully cataloged?
Well, these days I use Google Book Search.
Yes, right.
And even on Google Book Search with roughly 20 million books, I can't find the book.
Okay, right, okay. But
it
informed
saved,
your whole life.
It saved my life.
Saved your
Through
life.
the pages of that book, 2 people reached out to me to save me. One was Galileo, who was used as an example of the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And even though we know that's inaccurate historically.
Inaccurate. He was in jail, but not...
no, he made a deal with the Pope.
Okay, yeah.
He abjured his truth. He said everything I've written is wrong. That's not the truth at any price, including the price of your life, Harold. That's cowardice. And he won, instead of going to the stake, like Giordano Bruno had done, not long before.
That's right, yeah.
He won house arrest for the rest of his life.
Right.
And that's not the truth at any price, including the price of your
life.
life.
All those orbit pathways of Jupiter that proved we weren't the center of the universe, which merely messed up Hieronymus Bosch.
Right.
Human consciousness and sense of identity.
Messed up Ptolemy.
And
the Ptolemaic sense of the universe.
From Ptolemy,
right. So, but I got the positive view of Galileo, not the negative view.
Right.
And Anton von Leeuwenhoek, the draper, who would buy fabrics like this stuff around us.
Not to do with optics?
Yes, he would use a very high-tech device, the same high-tech device that Galileo was using, the lens.
Yeah.
And he decided to grind a lens. He was using the lens to see how fine the fabric weave was, how regular and how tight.
Was that regularly there in the society then? It would be like glasses.
It had just become brand new.
Brand new technology.
Yeah, exactly. Spinoza was grinding lenses. Von Leeuwenhoek.
So there was a revolution in optics.
Yes, there was a revolution in optics.
Right.
That led to both Galileo. What was Galileo's most astonishing achievement? There was a device that the Dutch had invented using these new high-tech things, lenses. Somebody had put a tube. I don't know where they got this ridiculous idea. They built a tube and they put a lens at one end and a lens at the other. And the goal was to be able to look to the horizon and see the troops of the Holy Roman Emperor coming, the troops of the Spanish Emperor.
Get a leg up.
Before you could normally see them with the human eye, before those troops could see you. And yes, get a leg up, exactly. Galileo, hearing of this high-tech device and being in charge of high-tech armaments, tried to make his own copy. And he did. He succeeded. He was very good at this kind of thing. But his revolution came from the fact that this was a device designed to be used horizontally, right? To look out on the horizon. He decided to look vertically, to look up. Now that was a ridiculous idea, Harold. Everybody knew exactly what was up there. It was a bunch of crystalline spheres, the absolute picture of perfection, with a bunch of perfect little dots. And the whole thing was being rotated by angels. Everybody knew that. What was the point of looking up?
And that it was the center of the universe.
Right, and he dared to look up. And what did he discover? These things in the sky.
Orbit pathways of Jupiter.
They looked like pebbles. They looked like rocks. They looked like things he'd seen on planet Earth. And that was the beginning of a revolution. But the bottom line is, this became my religion at the age of 10. The truth at any price, including the price of your life, and look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there.
Those are laws of science, you think?
Yes. Those, to me, are the absolute laws of science.
Science as opposed to...
As opposed to religion.
Okay.
Which is another way of looking at the world, but it doesn't ask you to re-perceive things. It asks you to perceive things in the same old way, or you're in big trouble, you go to hell.
Well, there was a lot of that. Yeah, there was a lot of that in
remember,
ignorance.
what we're really talking about
And
here.
we're still in a world of great deal of just general ignorance.
We
aren't
are,
we? And caught
and
up with past reified institutions and thought that's out of date with what the future requires.
But there's something else here. What we're talking about in this conversation is the difference between those ways of perceiving things that lock you in a cage and those ways of perceiving things that set you free to find new horizons and do the universe's work, which is to feel out possibilities she never displayed before.
Well, I was just saying that that general proposition probably informs or motivates. It appears molecularly and otherwise, but informs the whole evolutionary process of the creation of things.
Yeah, and the cosmos is
It's not
constantly...
just humanity.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
not just humanity.
No, the cosmos
the
will
whole
find
cosmos
some...
operates that way.
The cosmos will find new levels of emergent properties that we are
Emerging
incapable of
properties
predicting.
is the current term
Right.
coming out of cybernetics. and
Right.
everything. Yeah, right.
And it will find those things, and
Yeah.
it will find them with the creativity that stuns us, with or without us. But
Yeah.
better that it should do it with us, because we are the first. We are piles of protons, 13.82 billion years old. I'm trying to remember the exact date. It's 2 billion years old.
Yeah, right.
And
Apparently.
we are the first piles of these ancient protons, these children of the Big Bang. We are children of the Big Bang. And we are the first children of the Big Bang to be able to dream. We are the
As far
first...
as we know, yeah.
Yes, we are the first children of the Big Bang able to think. We are the first children of the Big Bang able to not just emote, because animals can do that,
They do.
but to take those emotions and turn them into adventures like this,
right.
turn them into
Is
lessons.
that the same as self-reflective consciousness that is pretty unique to us?
Yes,
in
and
terms
our
of-
obligation
Yeah.
is to use that to do the cosmos frigging work,
All
which
right,
is...
doesn't it also, one other aspect of human consciousness and capability or existence is that we can extend our consciousness through tools and technology uniquely to make the
Exactly.
world other than in an Eden-like
You've got
sense
it.
you are when you're embedded in
Right.
nature, which we're coming out of.
Right. So the cosmos' constant job is radically reinventing herself,
Okay.
radically upgrading herself.
Uh-huh.
And if we don't use this consciousness, this ability to dream, this ability to take emotions and turn it into poetry and speech and science, if we don't take that to radically reinvent the cosmos on her next great upgrade, she
Yeah.
will do an upgrade that surprises us with us or without us. But
They-
better it should be with us, because that's our obligation.
And to try and get to that, the
Yeah.
dinosaurs were done in by an asteroid.
Right.
They could be done in by atomic weapons that exist now in the
Right.
human condition.
Right.
And apparently they're species lethal. That's something we brought up in other programs.
exactly.
But it informs my thinking very
Right.
much.
So
Because-
every one of these, this is just a book filled with adventures, and it is a love story. You know, everything has to be a love story, because that's the way we humans are built. We are built to procreate, and so
Yeah.
is every creature that's ever had a gene or a genome.
Yeah. Right,
a gene
that's true.
string.
Yeah,
They're all built to procreate.
Yeah.
They all have a sexual
And there's a
fetish of
unity
kind.
at a certain level all throughout, right down to the molecular, out to the wildest parts of the unit. There are patterns that can be recognized and found to be relevant to our understanding of things comprehensively.
Well, we are
in a way
we
that's
are pattern
pretty unique.
sensing and pattern building.
I like the term pattern
machines.
recognition.
Right.
And it comes out
Me
of
too.
cybernetics.
Right.
Rather than great specialization
Right.
of reifying an institution in place, which is an easy way to
Right.
go, which we see a lot of in the news.
Right.
Right?
So, well, the
they're
thing-
reifying outdated institutions.
Right.
They should be creating new institutional structures and patterns of understanding that relate to the future.
Most important, not necessarily
What do you
creating...
think of the term the futurists? Who
Yeah.
think ahead.
So our job is not just to think ahead to
Yeah.
the future, although that's
But
very
to get
important.
designs that
Yes,
can bring
exactly.
it about.
To
yeah.
bring the future into life,
Right,
to bring the
right.
future to life.
It's
So-
a design thing? It's a design
Oh,
function
it's
in the
a
universe.
design function. It's
Yeah.
a function of art, design, religion, and science.
Now,
all of those things.
You had a great academy. Who was it who made the distinction between art and science and everything? But you said science, but
Well,
art.
it was
Who was the one who did that?
the two what was it called? The two
Yeah, there was two.
Scott Mills.
It wasn't
His
Mills.
name
It
was
was somebody else, but damn it.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But it made the distinction between art and science.
right. Well, art and science are together more than one imagines,
Oh,
because
B.
but here's religion,
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
and science. The case
Yeah.
is made in this book, in the
Yeah.
God
Yeah,
Problem,
yeah.
that religion, art, and science are all tools of the same process.
Okay.
They are all perceptual engines
Yeah.
of a kind. They are
Yeah.
all ways of grabbing hold of the universe, understanding it, and creating new realities based on that understanding. There's
Right.
Bloomism. a Bloom aphorism, that new ways of seeing lead to new ways of being. New forms of perception lead to new realities.
Right.
And each of these is a perception engine.
And that can also be a thing of evolution, is it not?
Well,
because
evolution
new appears.
Yes, evolution is groping toward her next great leap through our perceptual engines.
Okay, through our perceptual engine, but it's operative in the universe, it's operative in the evolutionary process itself at various levels.
It's at every single level of the, and not just the evolutionary processes
that's
we
what I'm
see.
saying. We have to not only be relating to the human condition, everything, the design challenges and all that sort of thing that are characteristic of the time in which we live.
Right. Well, the universe is a place of supersized surprises, and our job is to make the next...
Supersized surprises.
Yes.
That sounds like a combination of, holiday shopping time and whatever. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, it sounds like something you'd get
that's your
this
humor.
big.
That's your humor creeping in again.
But it's our job to make the next supersized surprise. Let me explain to you what I mean by supersized surprises.
Please do.
You and I are sitting at a coffee table, a little table like this.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the universe. And as you know, there's never been a universe. There's just been a great nothing.
Okay.
And you're the genius, and I'm the idiot.
Okay.
And you say, Howard, we're in our 38,000th cup of coffee, maybe our 300 or 300 billionth cup of coffee. Yeah. And suddenly you get an idea, and you say, see that little spot over there? And I say, Harold, there is no such thing as a little spot over there. There's no such thing as space or time.
Right.
And you say, well, I predict over there anyway that there's going to be a little pinprick infinitely smaller than a pinprick, and it's going to contain enough energy to create an entire universe.
Maybe universes.
Yeah,
maybe
and I point out to you some simple facts. We've been sitting here ever since there was a nothingness. And there never has been a pinprick, and there obviously never will be a pinprick.
It's obvious.
Yeah, right. And you're talking about containing a universe, containing the energy of a universe. I have news for you, Harold. There's no such thing as energy. We've been here, through 3 billion cups of coffee.
Everybody
There's
knows
never
that.
been energy. There never will be energy. And there's no such thing as a universe. What crazy stuff are you trying to feed me? Right. I mean, what got into your coffee, for God's sakes?
That's pretty strong stuff.
And all of a sudden, a pinprick, infinitely smaller than a pinprick, comes exploding from that space, from that spot that doesn't exist, into existence. This is a radical change.
How do we account for that?
An astonishing change.
We account for that by having, God did it, or an intelligent
let me give you a few more steps in this evolution of the supersized surprise. Okay, so this thing unfurls. First, it's a little dot. That's impossible. No such thing has ever been as a little dot. And then it has the audacity to unfold with 3 properties: space, time, and speed. Well, there's never been any such thing as space. There's never been any such thing as time. There's never been any such thing as speed. If the universe is a conservationist at heart, if the universe loves to maintain her status quo, how the hell could she pull off this outrage?
Right.
Against the very nature of nature. And then you make another one of your wacky predictions. It's your second one, since we've done 3 billion cups of coffee. And you say, okay, see that unfurling sheet of space and time that's moving at a speed that's utterly beyond belief? Harold, what are you talking about? Space, time, and speed. These things didn't exist. One to the how does it go? 1 times 10 to the minus 30 seconds of a second ago. The tiniest sliver of a second ago. This stuff didn't exist. And you say, well, I predict that unfurling sheet is going to precipitate. Somehow it has the substance with it, or whatever it takes, to precipitate in things. And I say, Harold, yes, you lucked out on the dot, right? You lucked out on the space, time, and speed. That was luck, But why do you think they call this thing we've been sitting in all these years a nothing? Because there are no things. Because things have never existed, and they never will. And if you try to tell me that space and time is going to turn into matter, and it's going to turn into things, you're crazy. Let's go back to Aristotelian logic. Garbage in, garbage out. 1 + 1 = 2. It does not equal something brand new.
Like a universe or two.
Exactly. And whammo, the first things come into existence. They're quarks and leptons. And they come into existence by the gazillions. And they're not random. They're not stochastic, to use the current word. Stochastic. The current word for randomness.
Okay. Stochastic, is that word?
They're not 6 monkeys at 6 typewriters flood of these tiny little objects. They come in only 16 different forms. And every one in a certain species is identical to all the rest of them in that species all across the face of the cosmos. How the fuck did that come about?
Right.
That's impossible.
It's obviously impossible. Why didn't bring it up?
Right, and if you trace the history...
There it is.
and these things have the audacity to have social rules. Social rules. Harold, if you're telling me these things have social rules, you're crazy. We all know that, things don't have social rules. That's anthropomorphism, Harold.
How has archaic man been able to deal with this status?
Well, if you call us archaic man, the problem...
Well, maybe, no, but I meant, Cro-Magnon, they had those caves and things. There was a self-reflective consciousness and everything.
It was the beginning.
That had to, so that is the source of a lot of creation ideas like God.
That's where ideas got started. But Harold, you have to realize we're still cavemen. In other words, our ideas are still primitive. We think that we've reached the end of time. We think that our ideas are the final word. No, our ideas are going to look very primitive. They're going to look as primitive as stone tools.
Yeah, exponentially so, it seems, in the time immediately ahead, or by this evening.
And guess what your job and mine is?
To try and
leap to the next great ideas, the next great perceptions, the perceptions that are as unexpected as that pinprick, as space, time, and speed, as the first thing.
Do you like the term that Fuller made? I like Fuller, and everything, the term synergy.
It is indispensable.
I think that way too. He used to talk to he would talk to 5,000 or 2,000 people and say, "Has anybody heard the word synergy?" No hands would go up hardly at all.
Amazing. Because
now it's on every ad
remember, in the last 30 years, it's
because
been used for
is
every corporate.
Yeah.
And companies have been conglomeration began in the 1960s and 1970s, when Gulf and Western was the biggest conglomerate around. It was called Engulf and Devour.
We had the building right here in Columbus.
And I had an office on the 23rd floor.
There in that building?
Yes, because I founded the Public Arts Relations Department for their 14 record companies.
Was the Columbus statue right there then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. Still there.
But the point is, in those days, it was simply conglomerating. In the 1980s and 90s, when the term synergy took off, all of a sudden, it was called synergy. And it was the same thing, collecting as many companies as you could under a single corporate umbrella.
Well, it was taking off before that in terms of his writing.
But it got an excuse.
Well, it took off. He wrote a book, Synergetics, way back. He wrote a geometry of synergetics. That was his magnus opus. He was into that all. And the universe is synergetic.
Well, let me tell you a little.
Unpredicted by the sum of the parts. There's something more, an emerging property, something more than the sum of the reified, outdated institutions.
Okay, I'm going to give you an example of synergy. We're back at our coffee table at the beginning of the universe, right? The very first things have come precipitating forth, quarks. The quarks, you're telling me they're going to have social rules. I know you're crazy because I know that's anthropomorphism, and anthropomorphism is not legitimate science.
Okay, go on.
But these quarks cannot live on their own. They have a social ache. They need to get together in groups of 3.
Quarks. Boson.
Well, no, let's just stick with quarks and not get confused.
That's right. Quark is really a crazy term.
Oh, it's a wonderful term.
It's a made-up term.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's taken from James Joyce.
Is it? Well, Joyce was a poet par excellence.
It's taken from the line 3 quarks for Master Mark.
Is that where it came?
Yes, exactly. So we're back to Joyce, which is one of your favorites.
You don't know where it's from,
No, it's from, I forget the name of the scientist. It'll come to me in a minute.
No, but it wasn't from...
He wrote The Quark and the Jaguar. Alan Guth, no, it wasn't Alan Guth. At any rate, the point is, so you're telling me these things are going to have social rules, and I'm telling you that you're crazy, and you're going off the deep end, and you're being anthropomorphic, and that is not scientific, and it's not logical. And it turns out these quarks need to get together in groups of 3. Okay, now look, Harold, even if they do get together in groups of 3, garbage in, garbage out. You add 3 quarks together, 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's only 3 quarks. That's all it is. That's all it ever will be.
Can't be anything more.
Consult your Aristotelian logic here.
Well, okay, go on.
And it turns out that Aristotle's dead wrong in his logic, and his logic is dead wrong. Only within limits.
Can we cut him some slack for having not a basis of understanding things in the way we're able to do now? How do we deal with history as a nightmare of ignorance?
Well, we'll deal with that in a second, because let's go back to synergy. synergy, because
Okay,
that's one of the key terms
It
in
definitely
the
is,
stuff
yeah.
that you think about all the time.
Well, yeah, I think increasingly the world does.
Yeah, and I do
Emerging
too.
properties is
Right.
determined as cybernetics.
Okay, so we're back to these quarks, and it turns out they do have social rules, and they do shun each other. Certain quarks shun each other, and certain quarks get together instantly. These are the rules of attraction and repulsion, social rules. And when three attract each other, they don't just become three quarks. They're not just what Aristotle would think. Aristotle said, if you understand the laws of the elements, you understand the whole. He was wrong.
well,
Because
okay,
now
yeah.
you know what a quark is, but three of them should just be three.
How do we handle people who had ideas that were wrong in
Wait,
history?
wait,
Oh,
the
I'm
trick
sorry.
is
I'm trying to jump the
The-
ball.
yes.
Yeah.
The one kind of group of three quarks, up quarks and down quarks, becomes a radical something new, something so surprising and shockingly new.
Synergetic.
It's beyond synergy, because it becomes a
beyond
proton. A proton has
yeah.
qualities
I
that
see,
are not foreseeable from looking at the laws of quarks.
It's not emerging
No,
property.
it creates an entirely new set of laws.
It's not
a proton.
If you get a qualitative rather than quantitative change, is that not then a new property?
Yes, it's something even beyond a new property.
Yeah.
It's a new reality. And
okay.
then if you get this kind of threesome, it turns into a neutron.
I'll be damned.
And
All right.
even
Yeah,
a neutron
right.
abides by social laws. Now,
Social laws.
yes, let me explain.
Please do.
If a neutron does not get together with a proton in the first 10.6 minutes of its existence, it dies.
It dies. Okay.
It dissolves. It comes apart. It becomes just a proton, and it sheds a tiny little extra element. So it's up against a social, what would you call it? It's not a curfew. It has a social limitation. Do this or die. It's up against a do or die social proposition. Right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And this is not anthropomorphism. This is the way that quarks work when they get together. This is the way that and they produce a proton and a neutron, and protons and neutrons introduce whole new laws into the universe.
Yeah, to be discovered finally by human intelligence.
Yes,
to be able
exactly.
to discover it, but it was operative for
Right. So what is the cosmos
13.7
doing?
billion years.
The
more or less,
cosmos
so.
is not a conservationist. The cosmos is the very opposite. She rips beyond her previous form of order into some new form of order and potential that's utterly beyond belief. And this startling, astonishing kind of change, the supersized surprise, is nature's business, and we are nature incarnate, so this is our job. The next great leap into something that seems drastically, impossibly, unbelievably new.
Of which we could then introduce on this sword is what's the date? The 26th of December, and the year is 2013.
It's 2013.
Of the Christian era.
And yes, is that the date?
Yeah,
it's the 23rd. It's the 23rd of December.
Thank you for your device there on your wrist. It's good to know. But I mean, what's the lesson of this in terms of we start looking at the world? We got about 10 minutes left.
Right.
What's the situation? The human condition now, or the condition of evolution in universe now. I did a program once, I've mentioned to you, I think on other occasions, Isaac Asimov put the laws of robotics down.
Right.
We got all kinds of problems confronting robotics that are now taking over the productive process beyond just information technology. We got huge transformations, we got great capability. We have capability on two vectors, one being the weapons I mentioned briefly there, which seem to have become such that the tridents alone have a capability of eliminating the Homo sapiens species. I've talked with you in the past on that. And we may also have come to a new order of understanding extended consciousness, which is tools and technology, to where we may have been. We just mentioned the fellow Peter Diamandis, right? He's got a book, Abundance.
Right.
Or you talk about the Zeitgeist movement and that sort of thing, or synergy.
Right.
That we may be coming to a world where we may be transcending material scarcity, the iron laws, clad laws of that. How do you see all that? A moment of liberation from, in an evolutionary sense, rather than just a historical sense or a political sense of the human scenario. To bring it into the human quality and then have it linked into the way in which the universe functions, and we're part of that.
Well, we have to escape doomthink. That's our major problem, right?
Think.
Right.
And doom
and
act.
eco-nihilism.
No, but we've got doom active capability that we haven't had.
But
we've been protected in our
It's not just coming from the nuclear weapons. It is coming from it is coming from the extremist ecological thinkers.
Well,
it is coming from Harold. Let me finish.
No, please,
it's coming from population bomb thinking.
That's Ehrlich,
whose predictions proved utterly wrong in 1980. He made specific predictions about 1980. Not a single one of them came true. In science, if your predictions don't come true,
then your
theory is out the window.
Right, okay.
Population bomb thinking
should
have been out of the window a long time ago.
Right.
We have gone from 1 billion people in roughly 1850 to 7 billion today. If we followed Paul Ehrlich's laws, we would be standing on each other's shoulders and starving to death. That's what he literally. Yes, but he literally predicted that for 1980. It didn't come true.
I did a program with him.
Population bomb thinking is false. Limits of growth thinking is false. The idea that we've eaten out this planet and eaten all of its resources is so false.
Particularly with new materials coming. You got nanotechnology just over the horizon. It'll have materials that are 10,000 times stronger than steel and
more
weigh
than
nothing.
That, we have invented.
You got all kinds of ephemeralization, doing more with less, and all kinds of things where we can have, maybe instead of it being a zero-sum thing in terms of human politics.
No, it's never a zero-sum thing. It is
always
in the world we're always growing the pie.
No,
the world we inherited is constantly growing the pie,
and
we must recognize that.
In the world of politics, it's a thing because the assumption of scarcity in an ontologic sense of the whole of the context of our thing has been just ipso facto considered absolutely like your quark.
Right. Well, in the
don't to say anything that there could be enough for all of humanity and the ecology in a way that brings a new way of being in the universe is ipso facto absurd. Everyone knows there's not nearly enough for one to win, the other has to lose. The guy who's got the gun can control, and all of that mix of realpolitik that informs our political process.
You said the right thing before your last paragraph.
What did I say right? What did I say right?
What you said right was that there's no end to the abundance. That the scarcity thinking is wrong.
No, scarcity thinking is characteristic of the ontologic reality in which humanity evolved. We have lived in a world of scarcity, material scarcity. We didn't have enough to eat.
Nah.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay.
Remember that the work on the Kongsan showed the Kongsan, the people of the Kalahari, the people who are considered the ultimate hunter-gatherers. Right.
Yeah.
Most of the year they had more than they could possibly eat. There were periods of scarcity.
No, that's eat. That's fulfilling some evolutionary function in the universe.
Harold, let me explain to you the part of what you said that was right.
Are you optimistic, pessimistic for the human?
I'm optimistic. In the last 30 years, we've invented an entirely new planet and an entirely new universe that has raised the level of abundance.
And it's only
beyond belief. But that's the internet.
Yeah.
With the internet, with a simple little, that's not such a simple invention, but with the internet, we've expanded the sphere in which we can operate. How much of your day do you spend on the internet?
Too much time, I would suggest.
Great.
Because I don't know how to
that means you're exploring a vast new landscape.
Well, there's a lot,
and it didn't exist 30 years ago.
Smoke signals, you know, you have to signal a little bit.
But we are constantly inventing new landscapes. We are and we are constantly inventing new real estate within which our mind can roam with less and less material property used to create it.
Because of the ability to affect the environment and through design build a world that's different than an
through the ability to exalt. It's people who exalt and adventure who create. Look, this thing has the power of 3 computers in 1950. And in 1953, computers would have taken 3 buildings the size of this building.
I'm here.
And now it's down to this.
I'm here.
And yet it opens to us what seems to be an endless universe.
It's heading for the vanishing point almost. It'll be going through the bloodstream. They'll be having things like that.
So we are abundance creators. And we are creators of new resources.
But we haven't been throughout most of our... When we came out of the cave, all the resources were here. We had a liaison with being able to utilize... All the oil was here, all the land, all the thing was here. But we had a liaison, 200,000-year liaison.
But Harold, think about this.
And Isaac Asimov said this is the defining generation, not
ours or the cave generation.
This was the defining, this generation, 100 years or something.
Right.
This is the defining moment in evolutionary terms.
Well,
that the condition in which our species existed and then prospered and so forth like that, we're coming to the end of that because the context that's emerging, if we make it. And we are at a point of crucial juncture.
Okay.
We can
This
stop.
is something very important
Okay.
because you've only got 2 minutes left.
We have 3.
3, okay.
3, go fast. Use haiku.
Every minute is the defining moment of
Okay,
history.
okay.
And in every moment, your job is to go beyond, and mine,
Yeah.
is to go far beyond doomthink, to see possibilities of a kind that no one has ever seen before to the best of our ability, and then it's to work our fucking tails off to create, to make those things into a reality, to publicize those things, to spread those things until they take hold and become something as radically new as the internet was in 1980.
That's a positive thing. You were talking about the beginning of the 60s. You remember 62? When we had
yes.
the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes.
I've never been so scared. We came within a hair's breadth of destroying all civilization.
And
we had the capability then. That's been increased. We now have the capability of wiping out the Homo sapiens species,
And
which has never been for 200,000
Right.
years. We were inputted, involving in an old order. We've reified all kinds of
Right.
institutions on the assumption there's not enough. What if we get to a world where everybody can realize their full potential? That there's a liberation that's blowing in the wind now, or something.
you're in that
We're
world.
coming into
You're in the beginning of that world.
But
If you choose to make it further, what it could be.
Well,
And
okay, but that's what I'm trying to say.
Remember what's happened
Are
since
you
19
optimistic? Do you
Yes.
think we'll make it, or do you think we're going to blow
I
it
think
all
we're going to
up?
make it. I
Well,
think
I
that
hope
we
we
are
can inform
overdosed.
the political class better than they're being informed.
We need doomsayers to
Collectively.
warn us,
Yeah.
like the eco-thinkers, and we need dreamers to guide us and to make new realities.
And new
we
reality.
need hard
Yeah.
work every
Yeah,
single day
yeah. Where is
to make
that
those
coming
new
from? You
realities
think
come
it's in
true.
our political class or our intellectual leadership class? Where is it coming from? The image of something new.
It's coming from us public intellectuals, Peter Diamandis, with Abundance.
Well, that's abundance.
Yes.
That's the thing that's in league with Kurzweil,
It's
and the
coming
singular
from-
and the zeitgeist
Right.
movement is
It's
something.
coming from all of my books.
To
the
all
best of my-
absolutely.
Yeah, to the best of my limited
Right.
abilities.
Yeah, right. Limited, not very
yeah,
limited,
because
yeah.
you know
Yeah,
I
you
have
do-
a mind that's far smaller than the minds of many of the kids I grew up with.
Yeah.
And but if you work harder, your mind can be bigger, even though it
I
starts
think you
out
can
small.
use more of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
in every-
exactly.
So.
And that's our job, to wrestle, to find the future that utterly defies belief. Forget about the status quo, because nature doesn't love to conserve her status quo. She loves to break her status quo.
Well, yes, but we do contain, we still have the first, the things that created first. We have to subsume the old and then have the new.
Oh, yes,
built.
you're absolutely right.
We don't eliminate.
No, you don't destroy the old.
So
you incorporate it.
That's right. So now if we're coming up to a world where you're going to have a liberated order rather than one where there's been political, realpolitik, enslavement of most of humanity by a few people
Right.
all throughout history, maybe we're coming to a time of fulfilling of the,
the dreamers who create new ideas and new concepts, the technologists who create new inventions, those people are going to do more to liberate us than any politician on the face of planet Earth.
Well, if
political
somebody-
ideas have generally proved to be poison, with the exception of those that led to the American Constitution.
Oh, well, that brings another story. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. We could bring up 1776 and all that, as they say in some of the things. But your pleasure, as so many times graced our program, Howard Bloom, a major voice of moving in the right direction. Thank you for that, with good humor and with good understanding. So good to talk to you. You can go off in a million different directions like a Roman candle, and we did and have and should. And so that's an emerging property that we're all trying to get to. So thanks a lot for viewing. Type in. We'll come back again tomorrow. Howard, thanks so very much.
Harold.
Happy holiday. No, it's a new year coming.
Yes.
We're taping to one and all. And thanks a lot, Howard. Always good to talk to Howard Bloom.
Thank
thanks
you,
a lot.
Harold, and have a wonderful